think we are good to go.
Okay, thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
Welcome, everyone. Today, we might be setting a bit of, making a bit of history today. This is the first meeting people seem to be aware of, a combined meeting of the Facilities Committee and the Business Functions Committee. And we will be discussing, among other things, we'll have reports from the architects at AEM on the Transportation Center. We'll have a brief report from Rob Prezui on other projects. And then, I don't know, Hunter, if you want to talk briefly just for a minute about what we'll be covering in the business functions portion.
There's really only one thing to cover, which is late addition to the agenda regarding an engagement letter with Fox Rothschild for Labor Council.
Got it. Okay. All right. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Phil Leinbach, if I could. And Phil, would you like to go ahead and give your presentation on the your latest submittal on the Transportation Center?
Certainly. A little bit of background. We met a few weeks ago with the administrative team and kind of picked up where I think we left off the last time with facilities and the board as far as where the project had stopped in 2015 and provided kind of an update of some of our thoughts. And then we spent, I guess about an hour plus going over some things that we could look to try to find some cost savings, reduce size and so forth. And so the result of that effort is what we want to go over with you this evening. Can I screen share now, Joe?
Yeah, you should be good to go.
Okay, I didn't want to steal it. And let me see. This works for me. Share. And are you seeing the floor plans there in front of you?
Yes, we are.
Okay. This is a site plan, and just so you note, down here about where my cursor is right now is the 2015 drawing from April of that year. And what we've done is taken and highlighted areas of that plan that are now revised based on the meeting that we had a couple of weeks ago. Essentially, the block right in the middle, the size of the transportation building is reduced, and we'll look at that a little bit closer in than at this level. The other changes are the result of adding an LP fueling station for the propane fueled buses that the district has and is looking to grow that fleet. I'll speak a little bit more to that when we get down to the estimate and where that stands right now. But basically the diesel and the regular fuel island here in line with that so that we keep the same traffic flow. And maybe we need to work some of those final details out as we develop the plan a little bit more. We've taken the dumpster that was in this area and moved it over to the west end of the building so that we could get some of the parking that we lost down in this area of the plan up where the dumpsters were. The remainder of the parking spaces that were lost down here at the southwest corner, we've located along the double loaded parking area that connects from the elementary site down to in front of the transportation building, which is largely driver parking. And then there's also overflow parking for events at the elementary school. Also, it gives you another access from a safety and security standpoint for fire, police, emergency medical services if they ever need to access the site. So principally, that's the changes to the site. Nothing else there was really found that we could reduce. This is what's needed for the current load of the buses that are currently kept on site down at Kerr Road, along with the vans and spaces for the drivers and a little bit of room, sensible room to grow if additional vehicles are added to the fleet. And
Joel, can I ask you to go back? Can I ask you, this is Dave Hemberger. Could I ask you to go back just there for a second? I just want to make sure I'm clear on where everything is relative. Now, I do see Boyertown Pike at the top, so I'm assuming that's the road across
Correct.
The upper edge of the portrait here.
That is right.
And the school then would be to the right over here. Can you kind of outline where the school is? I'm not quite.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if I can draw. I'm in a PDF right now, and there is some type of a tablet that it disappeared on me. So the school is kind of over in this area.
Oh, okay. So what is
So-
what's to the left of that area? All that there, yeah.
I believe that is a solar field, or that's your geothermal field. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I
so
don't-
it's underground.
Correct. That's underground.
Okay,
And then there's actually a pretty good knob up to this area, and then the site falls off down from the elementary school about 25, 30 feet in elevation. So I'm not
Yeah.
saying you can't see the transportation building from the elementary parking lot, but you're not going to have a clear view of it. So there's a pretty good elevation change from the one to the other. So visually, they're separated pretty well on the site. So if there's any concerns about student population being near the transportation building, unless you're out on the walking paths and so forth down in the environmental area,
Well,
the
so-
two are well
so-
separated.
so where's the access from Boyertown Pike to the facility?
Right here.
Right there. And is
I
there
don't know why I'm getting purple, but it's what I got. So that
is there a
is-
road? Is there a street or a road that is in there? I can't quite see. I see a lot of
there's right now there's a stone road that's there that is an emergency access that comes in, and that's gated off. But this would be a drive. That's the throat of the drive coming in. So the flow of traffic back in the site's coming down here.
Oh, that to the left of the building.
Yeah,
As-
here's the throat of the drive. I just found another color here.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. All right.
So the main cartway is kind of running along here.
And the buses will be parked where? I'm sorry again.
Bus parking, this is all bus parking down in this area.
All right.
The
And
long
what's
angled spaces are over here. Then this provides some parking spaces for vans inside the fenced area. This is basically drivers, and maybe there's going to be some other vehicles there as well at the present time. But I think there's space right now for the entire bus fleet, including vans, to park inside the fence back here.
okay? And as we're looking at the front of the building where you would enter it, or where the buses would drive in, I'm assuming it's on the bottom side as we're looking at it.
Well, buses would enter the drive-through bays here. These are two drive-through bays. These
Okay.
two bays are just service pull-in bays.
All right.
So they can drive through those two bays. This is the wash bay, and you'll see this better on the next floor plan.
All right.
This is a general service maintenance bay. These two bays, the one has the lift in it, and the other one is just a pull-in bay for service maintenance.
So when you say the north side of the building, it would be the top side of the building?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, there is a north arrow up here. It's pointing straight up on this sheet. So
Okay. All right. Thanks for that clarification.
not a problem. Anything else from any other committee board members before I move on?
No, not yet.
Okay. And they're all on this screen now too. So where's my erase? Clear. Oh, there we go.
Sketch was a lot easier.
I gotta turn that off. Here we go. So what is showing on the screen right now, the upper plan is the bus garage as it was left off in 2015, 12,400 square foot footprint, about 13,185 square feet of floor area that includes the mezzanine. I'll zoom in on that first. Starting from the left, there was wash bay equipment, an automatic wash bay pull through for the buses, a second drive-through bay that we talked about. The orientation on this plan is the same as what we just saw on the site plan, so you don't have to try to imagine this differently on the plan. These are two service bays. They're pull in, back out. This bay has a mezzanine in it that's part storage and so forth. And then obviously a restroom for the mechanics to access here, stair going up to the mezzanine. Additional storage, utility room, that's probably going to be where your electric service and so forth, gas service are coming into the building. And then, of course, the office driver's area on the east end of the building. After meeting with administration and with Rick's help in looking at some efficiencies. One thing we did was the overall wash bay got a little bit wider. With the wash equipment gone and the need to have a portable mobile scrubber in there, the feeling was there just wasn't enough room to move around the bus that it was in there. We agreed with that. So that one did get larger. I think that was a 20-foot bay. We made that 20 feet larger. To save, then we made these other bays that were all 24 feet wide. They're all now 22 feet wide. And the previous design had shown some separating walls in between. They are eliminated. So there's plenty of clear space. We're looking at about 14 feet between each bus, roughly 7 feet from any bus to a hard wall surface. So plenty of room to move around. I think safety is adequately addressed with clear movement around there. Also, we changed the depth of the overall building. That decreased. We skinnied up the clearance at the back of the bus to about 3.5, 4 feet. And we have roughly about 13 feet to tire storage racks along the front of the 2 service bays. So they were some very good things to help us reduce the overall scope of the footprint. Overall, then, because the building got narrower, we had to give a little bit of thought of what we could do here. Just to go back to the old plan, we reduced the number of fixtures. Now, Rick or somebody comes back and says, I just can't do with the number of new fixtures. I think we can squeeze them back in there, but we got rid of this separated corridor off the driver's training room, as it was designated there, and just reconfigured things a little bit to deal with the less in depth of this space. We still have the same functional program. That corridor is gone. I have an airlock here. I put an airlock out of the back. If the drivers are parking out in the front of the building, this is where they would access the building in the morning, clock in and so forth, and then head out to the buses. So we've shown tables there for setup, more of it, for drivers if they're coming back, eating their lunch and so forth. But if we need to set it up for training, we can still squeeze about 80 seats in there, because now this corridor is really part of the driver's area to create some additional efficiencies there. The mezzanine, by virtue of the building getting smaller, is a little bit smaller overall, but it still takes up that full bay as it had previously. Any questions on the floor plans here?
I do. I'm just curious, and maybe there is a simple answer to this. Why are we using 4 bays versus 3 or versus 2?
We did have the discussion of the potential of eliminating a bay. The reality is we would save some costs, no doubt, on construction, but we're more or less taking volume out of the building. We're not taking a lot of constructed product out of the building. I think previously the estimated savings to eliminate a bay was fairly minimal, was about $32,000. Inflation adjusted, it saves about $37,000 on the building was the estimate for the savings to take a bay off. It might be a little bit higher if we take out, mechanicals and so forth, but we're just talking about heat, general ventilation in there. There's no cooling, so it is pretty straightforward finishes. Now, it is an insulated building envelope, but the bang for the buck of what you save isn't a straight square foot savings. It's not, if this overall building's about, I think, $180 a square foot on construction costs on the building, not including the site costs, I'm not getting $180 a square foot out of that to take that out. If that's something the board wishes, as we move forward with the design, we can certainly look at that as an alternate, but that, I leave to the discretion of the board and certainly administration to see the sensibilities of that.
Do you guys have
the discussion?
Do you guys have a running list of items like that where there are cost savings to be realized, but the return on investment is, more than the investment, basically, so that if we get farther down the line and we need to make some decisions, we have a list to go to? Because that was a pretty good response through what I'm thinking. But if if there's a problem with getting support around the total cost of the building, we'd want to return to that.
Certainly, and I think the goal here, as we understood it tonight, was trying to design to the, I don't want to say the worst case scenario, that's not good phraseology necessarily, but the largest expectation of what we would need to take to the township for the zoning variance hearing.
Okay.
Then once we come back and really drive the design and get the documents set, I think that's where we can talk about some of those things. We did bounce around a few things with administration. One was the asphalt, and again, looking at the cost savings that potentially were there with an alternate for the ongoing maintenance. To have to push stone around in like the bus parking area just didn't seem to be a sensible thing to pursue. So that's not included at this point, but again, that's up to administration and the board. If you direct and say, hey, we want to look at some of these things, we're at the mercy of the board, and that again isn't necessarily a great word, but we're going to do what you want to get this project to move forward in the best possible way. What we want to do at zoning is build and get approved the worst case scenario, and really, I think more than anything, build the site out. If the building has some nuances and things that we can deal with in the future, then perhaps we can look at some of those. So they're not off the table, but I'm kind of looking at, this is the best reduced scope without, we could squeeze the building down more, but I really think what starts to happen is we create a lack of flexibility for things that may change in the future. And I don't want to give Rick a facility that his people says, okay, great, we squeeze this thing down to the bare minimum, and now we find ourselves and we're back with a building that's Kerr Road all over again.
Okay. Another question I have is the purpose of a meeting room. I don't know, Rick, if you can kind of touch base on, what kind of use that would have, because in my own mind, and the reason I'm kind of questioning that is the meetings where you would need privacy are probably meetings that may need to happen at the administration building. And maybe I'm just painting too broad a brush there.
Well, the drivers, we need a place for the drivers to come in.
Okay.
Ben has been doing research classes. We need a room for research classes. We should be doing a lot more of safety instruction. And it's much better to do it there. A lot of times you need to go to a bus. So I just think having a room where we can do those things is very good, especially when you're building a new building.
Mm-hmm. Is there a reason why you would have a meeting room that's small, like the one close to the office area, versus being able to do that in the driver's center?
Well, this meeting, okay, the meeting room here.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Well,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
No, yeah, one of the problems we have in this facility here is no privacy. So if we have a parent who stops in, or if we have to talk to a driver in private, a lot of times I walk outside. We'll go outside. That's the most private area. So again, in building a new facility and looking for 30 years in the future, I thought it would be advantageous to have a room which you could address private matters privately.
Okay.
If I could add to that, and Rick, if you would confirm, I think we had indicated on the order of 30 to 35 drivers are coming into the building at a given time that could be in that area as they're getting ready, clocking in and so forth, and heading out to the buses. That's on a usual day. In addition to then that doubling also as a space where you could do the training and certifications.
Yes, that's correct, because you have everyone coming basically and leaving in less than a half-hour span. So it does get busy. And then of course, when they get back at the end, 9 o'clock at the end of the morning run, when everyone needs to use a facility, yes, there are quite a few there at a time.
Okay. I don't want to be a pain, but I'm also curious about the file retention. There's a files room there. what kind of files are being stored at the office? Because I would think that most of the files that you guys would need to store could be stored at desks or on the computer. And if they're, personnel related files, those should really be stored at the administration building. So I'm just wondering if you can kind of address that for me.
Sure. The main files that I save are all the information that we need for the transportation, the state transportation report. So that has all our 8-mile average, your 8-month mileage average, your load counts, basically everything the buses do for a year. They have rosters there with them. Those we usually keep for about 8 years. So it can pile up. I used to keep time cards. I no longer keep time cards, but right now they go upstairs. And
I mean, you really don't have a storage room other than that file room for your administrative needs, is what I'm hearing.
correct.
Whether you put files there or whether you store anything else, I mean, all the other storage is devoted to, equipment and tools and things for the workshop, from what I can see.
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
And I think I would add, there's a pretty good demarcation between kind of the clean side of the building, not to say your garage is filthy, but you're keeping the mechanics and trying to keep the garage dirt and things from being carried in there with that separate bathroom and so forth. And I'll add the janitor's closet is required by code, as are the drinking fountains. So there are some things that are necessary within the code. It's not to say they won't be used. So we pretty much pared this down, I think, about as tight as we can get it based on what we understand today. And again, we'll take a harder look at this before this, becomes a set of bidding documents. Our first hurdle is variance and getting past that. And then, with the board's authorization, then driving towards CDs, and we'll have ongoing reviews. This isn't the last look that administration or the board certainly is going to have at this.
I appreciate that, Phil, and I look forward to that process. I know, though, that things that happen sometimes are the stone starts rolling fast, and the longer that you go down the road, it becomes harder to pare things back. So this is going to be a controversial product, and we just want to make sure that we're doing everything we can from the outset, and not coming in middle lane and saying, well, if we do that, then we're resetting our schedule by a month, making those fixes.
Well, toward the end here, I do have a timeline so we can talk about a little bit of that. And
Okay.
I think that will give evidence to you so you can go back to your constituents and say, we have a plan in place and there's a review process, because essentially, as we go to the variance process, we're going to set these plans down
Yeah.
and develop what we need with council to go before the zoning hearing board. Once we get beyond that, then we'll pick those up. So we're not going to overshoot our headlights with this design. We're going to sit and basically stand down with developing any design, support the variance process. Then if we get a positive result, move forward from there.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anything else? And we can certainly come back. These are some elevations, just kind of developing the building. A couple of things we wanted to point out. The previous design had a double pitch roof. We believe we'll save a little bit of money because now we're looking at 3 pieces for the pre-engineered steel frame versus 4 pieces. So field labor decreases a little bit. Single directional slope. I can collect all my water at the back and tie into the stormwater system on the south side of the building versus the north side of the building. We will watch the height of the building. If I can bring that down a little bit to cut down on the volume, we will do that. But I need to make sure I have adequate space for mechanicals, lighting, and so forth in there. But we think there might be a bit to get a little bit of savings out of that. So that was one thing that we've looked at as a potential cost savings. Again, I don't need to look at every one of these, but an overall section so you can just kind of get a sense of the wash bay, the secondary service pull-through bay that has the lift, and then the 2 service bays to pull into the garage for service, and then the office. So you get a sense of the overall volume. We do want to watch and make sure that I maintain adequate clearance at the mezzanine to comply with the code. so that that is a usable space, and we don't obviously want a headbanger for the folks that are going up and down there accessing and getting parts. This kind of gives you an overall sense of, not that the fuel island is directly to the west of this, but if you can kind of imagine this 50, 80 feet, you know, further into the site, you can kind of see a sense of the 4 bays on the back of the building, the fuel island to the left. This is a representation of the diesel and the regular fuel island, and the lanes to access that, some of the fencing and gates around the site, and some of what you'd be seeing there. Just an idea of the rendering. I think you can, you know, see this is pretty much a plain vanilla building. It's pre-engineered steel metal siding. I think it's important to keep a material like split face or some type of a masonry up to that water table at the windows, because metal's just not going to take the abuse real well over time the way a stone product would. You can't dent stone, but you can dent the siding on the garage, and we will have bollards around the garage door openings and so forth. And again, you know, we're just suggesting some colors here. We're not locked into anything. And then final thing that I want to look at here is a proposed timeline. Simply, we've kind of taken, here we are in the middle of August and are projecting everything forward from tonight's meeting. We know that we're looking about 3 to 5 months for the zoning variance process. So we're showing 3 months initially, up to maybe an additional 2 months, depending on the preference of the zoning hearing board. If they want to wait a month before they make a decision, sometimes you'll go to the zoning hearing, you can press for a decision that evening. But we wanted to make sure that there's adequate time included for that. I'm not going to go through each of these line items, but essentially we're giving you a step-by-step of what's going on. We've already done a little bit, you know, of this preparatory work to kind of define everything, get up to estimates. And we have kind of tonight, if you look at the schedule, the board authorizes seeking the zoning variance. That's not ours intended to push you. If you come out of the meeting comfortable saying, yeah, we're ready to move on that, so be it. If you say we need to digest this for a month, then this whole thing just simply shifts a month forward in the process. Then you see some other things in here. As we're going through zoning, we might start some approval to develop some of the preliminary things. And that's really looking at the end here to say, hey, we're pretty confident that things are going to move positively if you want to get going. That's not to say that we just wait and push that out to this point. Look, lost the hand here, hold on. Assuming things go well at the zoning level, we've kind of created this critical path, the dashed blue line. And the next thing that comes in after the zoning hearing is the regulatory approvals become the driver. County Conservation District, where we need to go for approval for the DEP side of things, is estimated to take at least 6 months. Apparently they've had a pretty good backlog there and things just have not been moving quickly. In addition to the NPDS permit that we would need through the Conservation District, we would be moving forward with land development with the township. At the point that we feel confident, we would approach PennDOT for the highway occupancy permit. The existing driveway is permitted, but only as an emergency access. So that would need a new permit and a revision for that to be used for a principal access to this project. Once that's in hand, they're the regulatory approvals we would need to have in hand to get full land development. Once land development's in hand, that coincides with us then going to bid, and I'm jumping down to the green phase here. So bidding, we don't recommend until we've got full land development in hand, because I don't like surprises after the fact. Sometimes you have a conditional approval, and then the 9th hour, somebody says, oh, and by the way, we need this. And nobody likes to come to the board after the project's been awarded and say, hey, we need an extra $50,000 because we didn't know about this. So we want to make sure we have all those regulatory approvals in hand before we go out to bid. With that, then, as the regulatory process is going on, we'll certainly get started back with that construction documents phase. So this is where we really kind of pick up, cleaning up the design development up here and picking up and moving into the construction documents phase, basically getting the documents ready for public bidding. And I just want to touch on one thing here. Looking at this project, I think it's crucial that we consider a fifth prime contract. By law, we will have to have general construction, plumbing, HVAC, and electrical. But because there's so much site work, it's almost half of the project. I think there's money to be saved there for the district by making site work a separate prime, where they would come in, prep the pad, turn it over to the general contractor, and then the 4 trades take off on the building. They'll have some site related work with site lighting and things like that, but pretty much then leave the site to the site contractor, because one of 2 things will likely happen. I'll get a site contractor that's going to try to be a general contractor, and all too often that doesn't work well. Or I get a general contractor that brings a site guy in, he gets his $2 million bid, marks it up 5%, and you just paid an additional $100,000 on $2 million worth of work. So that's something to keep in mind as we're looking at this. That could be a savings on bid day just by breaking another bid package in. We're showing formal design reviews at about the 50% and 90% marks during construction documents phase with the owner, at which point we can hammer out those details on what should be an alternate in the project, what are design alternates, add, deduct alternates, and those types of things. And then certainly the board approves a final design, updated cost estimate, and authorizes bidding before we hit the street with the project. Once we go to bid, and now my screen's getting too short for everything here because it's over on the other end, and I'll try to capture, got the wrong one here, bear with me. Bidding phase, we've got roughly about a month in there for that. Obviously, bid the project 5 times that I've recommended, and again, my recommendation, that's your decision at the end. Get contracts in, reviewed, approve them, bonds, insurances, everything's confirmed, construction starts. We're looking at roughly about an 8 to 10 month construction schedule, but in all likelihood, if we're following this schedule, we'd be going over the winter with site work, so we'd probably stand down midwinter and wrap up the site work in the spring. But if I can get the building pad started and ready for the general contractor to get on by August, September with a pre-engineered steel building, it's not out of the question to have the frame foundations up and erected and getting closed before we get into the heart of winter. So substantial completion, obviously, in project closeout gives you kind of a quick overall view of a proposed project schedule moving forward. Questions on the schedule?
What's the likelihood that PennDOT will ask us to either widen the roadway or add a turning lane?
Yes, in all likelihood, I would say one or the other, or perhaps even both.
And would that add, what would that add to the project in terms of both dollars and timeline?
Timeline, it won't add anything. I believe the dollars are in there for that, but I will double check. I believe there was an assumption made that we would be doing something that with just the entrance itself is substantially larger than what you have there now. And I believe that was included, but we can certainly check with Stackhouse and verify that. But I believe that is assumed to be in there. If we get beyond that, if they start talking traffic lights or more than, you know, shoulder widening and perhaps a turning lane similar to what you have at the other entrance, then possibly we would be looking at more cost, but I will double check on that.
Thank you.
And I'll shoot an email to Ann and she can distribute that answer back then to the committee. Any other questions on schedule?
Just one, Phil, and I think I've asked it before, so I apologize. Are there any other government agencies or entities that we will have to deal with here?
Not that I am aware of at this point. I can't even think what that would be. Obviously, we're going to have Exeter Township with a building construction permit, but I think we're dealing with the county, we're dealing with PennDOT, and we're dealing with Exeter Township. I'm not aware of anything else right now, and I'm racking my brain to potentially think what we could be dealing with. Certainly, if we become aware of something, we'll let you know, but I think there are 3 that we've got to focus on.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly. By way of costs, I just want to go back to where we were in 2015. This was a $3.4 million project with a 12,400 square foot building. Justin, when he was working, had updated that number in 2017 to 3.9. We updated the number with inflation adjustment based on our note here. It was roughly averaging just under 3.5% per year. That's the number we went to the administrative team when we met with them, the 4.3 million. After getting our information back from them, you can see the site cost increased. That's largely because there's some added costs with regard to the LP fueling station and creating new spaces for parking for the parking that was displaced by the LP fueling station. You'll see a reduction in cost in the building. This, we went back and did a revised updated estimate on that. So it doesn't come down drastically, but it's down overall from when we met the last time. This is basically where we're comfortable right now in today's dollars with the general construction. You can see the site increased, and that's largely, as I said, because of the LP fueling. So general construction and the site works about 3.1 million. Plumbing construction decreases from losing the wash bay. Most of that 260 was in the wash bay number previously, but then it increases again because the LP fueling station would be furnished and installed through the plumbing construction contract, as would the fueling island for the regular diesel fuel. HVAC construction is relatively unchanged. One thing we did delete is a radiant heat in the floor slab, which was in that number. We didn't drive that back too hard because it's not a big piece of it, but that was one thing we had agreed that could be taken out. Electrical construction, really, the big change there is nothing overall with the project other than there was about $10,000 included back in 2015 for the power for the wash bay equipment. That's been backed out. So we're looking at a total project estimated cost with the reduced scope of building at just over 4.2 million. The building footprint is reduced by about 23% down to the 9950. The overall building area only decreases by about 20%. We've changed the roof line from the double pitch to the single slope roof. And I already mentioned the radiant heat in the floor slab. So that's where we stand today. Any other questions that we can answer? And I'm sorry, I failed to introduce, I know administration met Michael Savage. He joined us back at the beginning of the year. Kind of feels like our new employee, but he's been doing most of the heavy lifting on the design. He's been sitting here to my side here, but he is a registered architect and is going to be working closely with you in anticipation of a positive result with the township. So we'll answer any questions that we can at this time.
Can you kind of break down the cost for the site construction?
Insofar as
it's $2 million.
I do not have a breakdown on that, but you are looking at probably, substantial cost for asphalt and paving work. Obviously, the excavation is a big number. That is not a flat area of the site. It's flat where we're siting the building, but there is a lot of cut and fill. If I can kind of take us back in here, all this is fill. You can see where we're building that out to cover up the slope. So there's a lot of fill material that we're bringing in, cutting into the existing bank somewhat, but there is a lot of earth moving that needs to take place. I would say principally that's your big expense, is the paving and the cut and fill work to move the dirt around the site and any import or export that's generated. We like to get these things close to balance. We never represent that to bidders because that's always change order number one. So we throw that back at them to determine if there's import needed, you're bringing it in. If there's export, you're taking it out. It needs to be in your bid, and I'm not paying you extra for it later on.
So I think that you referenced in the beginning the possibility of doing stone, and I think that you guys had made a decision that there's some loss in there with constantly having to refill stone. I passed the Eshelman's park. I don't know if you want to call it a park. The Eshelman's parking lot every day to work, and they use stone for the vast majority of their parking lot where they have their bus fleet. for several of the districts in the county. And, you know, I'm wondering if you can kind of speak to that a little bit.
What we had suggested was the area where the bus parking is, perhaps put it in stone temporarily. The real aggravation with that is obviously we don't get to pick when the snow falls. And when you're pushing snow where you have paved cartways and so forth, it's tough on the guys that are plowing. It's far more efficient if I've got a clean push through the parking lot. So you can get your lot cleaned far more quickly and efficiently. And with the timing of trying to get buses out, I certainly understand not wanting that. There again, you know, it's something you can look at. It would be one of those things I wouldn't press for if you can afford it in the bid. But that again is a matter that the board and administration need to take up. That's not my decision to make.
Okay.
So I leave that in your hands.
Phil, this
What-
is Dave Hemberger. I had a question about security fencing. Is that included in this plan?
Yes. Basically, it's hard to see on this plan. I didn't want to hit you with too much. I think pretty much the entire bus lot area up to the building, we have an automatic gate up in this area. That is all fenced back here. The front of the site is not, because we want that parking to be available for elementary overflow.
And is there any ornamental landscaping that's included in the plan?
Oh, I'm sure the township will require that we've got to do certain buffering and so forth. So we would only recommend what the township requires us to do and allow the district to do whatever decorative ornament needs to be done later on. We don't want that to be what kills the project, but I'm sure Exeter Township in their subdivision and land development ordinance will have us planting quite a few trees.
Well, and I think the township now retains a township planner, which I think now with the zoning ordinance and the saldo, they often have the township planner work with the actual project team to create something that they like, basically. So they'll do the work for us, even though we'll probably end up paying for it anyways.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
They will let us know what we need to have. I mean, we will try to keep it sensible, and we will ask them obviously to keep us within the four corners of what the ordinance says we must do. We don't certainly want to plant a forest just because we think somebody thinks it's a good idea. We need to be, you know, falling under requirements that exist, not just a feeling from somebody to say, oh, this feels like a good thing.
Phil,
I'm
question.
sure we will have to do a residential buffer on that west and in the southwest.
Phil, question about the propane fueling station. Does that require a separate prime, or is there a contractor that specializes in those, or is there a propane provider that would be, you know, engaged?
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up. I forgot to mention that. Right now, the number we gave you has you purchasing, I think it's a 1,900 gallon tank. You can get a 1,000-gallon tank for the fueling station. But what might be best here is for you to initially lease the tank before you determine what your ultimate LP fleet size is. So if you lease the tank, that cost would come out of the construction and would be an annual cost, which would certainly save you a few dollars. And I think the difference was, I don't have the numbers in front of me, somewhere in the neighborhood of $20,000 to $40,000 to purchase the tanks. And that's something we would certainly look to Rick and his folks to say, this is adequate, and we would work with the fuel people. But that would be done under the plumbing construction contract. And that's fairly typical under plumbing or HVAC. They pick up the fuel. In this case, I think they're looking at it simply outside the building. It's a lot of piping and so forth. And all of that is DEP certified work. And with the LP, I think the International Fuel Code and NFPA are going to have some dictates on how that's installed as well.
What's the total cost of that particular component of the project?
We have it estimated, I believe, on the last page here at 175 added to the project.
Okay.
And that's the fuel island, that's a canopy, that's the additional parking that we have to shuffle around to create space for it. So it's it's not all just fueling station costs. So it's basically the change of the site work to incorporate and accommodate that LP fueling station.
Yeah.
The LP, that the fueling station, I think, was $20,000 to $40,000, plus then there's going to be flat work. So physically, that's probably, I'm going to say, in the neighborhood of $80,000 to $100,000. The rest of it's probably site cost.
Okay. I know we visited a school district that had LP fueling station, and it seemed like they received a considerable amount of assistance in the in that particular component of the facility from a contract or a fuel contractor. Might have been, is it Rhodes? Was it Rhodes? And you might remember.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, and you were on that visitation too. It seemed like that, you know, they had recommended as well. You know, you really kind of calibrate the size of your system by, you know, your usage, and you know the contractor can pretty much put in or remove those size containers at will.
That's a little bit of the discussion we had with Steve Gribb at SDE, that, you know, whatever we design there, we want to make sure that there's adequate footprint to expand as your fleet may expand. But I'm obviously not going to build for a fleet of 30 LP buses when you've got 2 right now. So that's something that would get investigated a little bit more before we finalize construction documents for what's right today and what gives you flexibility going forward in the future. And I kind of like, personally, I'm thinking I like the idea that you lease that tank for the time being. Then as you build your fleet, probably whoever you're leasing from has the ability to increase the size of that as you grow. And when you get to that perfect situation, then you'll probably say, hey, it's time for us to buy our own tank rather than leasing this month to month.
Yeah, that makes sense to me too.
Has there been any consideration to, for lack of a better term, cannibalizing some of the space that's already been developed around the elementary school and reworking some of that to realize a cost savings on the earth moving that's going to be required here? You know, I have my own suggestions, but I'm no engineer or architect or anything. So I'm just wondering if those discussions have taken place.
I had that discussion today with Aristides from Stackhouse, and I think that's what they were looking at previously. We will have to rerun cut fill calcs, and if we have a spoil borrow area, I think there's a large area of dirt. Some has been taken away on the east side of the site that he seemed to think that might be there that would be available. That has to be cleared and be part of your NPDES permit though with DEP, so that I can go and disturb that and then restore it before we leave. But obviously that's something we would take a look at unless we know that, hey, we need, I'm making numbers up now, 1,000 cubic yards of import, and suddenly somebody across the street says, hey, I'm doing a construction of a warehouse, I need to get rid of dirt, you know, I can bring it your way. In all likelihood, it's going to be cheaper to pull it off your own site because I'm not driving 5 miles somewhere to get dirt or to take dirt. Because that's the one thing with export, I have to take it to a DEP approved site. I just can't dump dirt at Bob's farm down the road because he said, hey, I want to fill this hole in down here. It has to go to a DEP certified site that is permitted to accept it.
Related to the development that could have to take place at Boyertown Pike, has there ever been any type of piggybacking off of state work that they're doing or anything along those lines to try and reduce some of that cost and get it a part of a larger project that PennDOT might be doing or might want to do?
That's a great idea. Unfortunately, it seems PennDOT typically tries to piggyback off of us and say, oh, while you're here, we want you to do this. And that's one of the things we'll have to be careful to say, hey, wait a minute, we don't think this is fair for us to fix your headache. So that's something we need to be mindful of. It would seem to be sensible, but that's one of those wrinkles that all of a sudden we're trying to work in tandem with PennDOT. Sometimes the headaches and the oversight that are created are far worse than the pain of just saying, hey, we'll put our own turning lane in and be done with it.
Okay.
I mean, we'll look at those opportunities if something comes up. Just more often than not, they're coming to us with their hand out more than they're saying, "Hey, let us help you out."
Yeah. Okay.
This is Yuri. I have a question about like the like Owatton Creek seems to be a very environmentally friendly type of area. There's 2 creeks there. There's solar panels and all these other things. Do you think there's going to be any issue with like the EP, like any type of standards at all by putting the bus depot there?
Well, that's part of the zoning aspect, not necessarily the environmental, but the zoning is, this is not a use that is permitted by right for that type of facility at that location. And so that is going to be part of the challenge to say, well, what are you doing there to prevent those concerns from being impacted on the environmental areas? The subdivision and land development ordinance, along with the erosion and sedimentation control plan through the conservation district, will require a look at that so that we're not putting detrimental things into that area. The parking lot does flow down into that area, I believe, but the bus bays and so forth, we will have a grease interceptor so that we're not carrying grease and those types of solids out of the wash bays and so forth. That's going to be part of that before it goes into any stormwater system. So the conservation district, along with the township subdivision land development ordinance, will put stipulations on that. And not that I'm looking for extra things to load on the project, I wouldn't be surprised at all that we come out of the variance that they say, we'll give you the variance, but we're asking you to do this as well. Don't know what that might be, but oftentimes they'll ask us to be considerate of those types of things. Overall, my personal feeling is this development can be done without creating an impact on those areas that exist now with sensible approaches.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Certainly.
Any other questions from board members or anybody else? All right, Phil, thank you very much.
Thank you. And I will check into that one question on the HOP, and I'll get back to you, Ann, and let you know as soon as I have a clarification that those costs are included to some extent. And I think that was the only homework we had tonight.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
Thanks, Phil.
Have a good evening.
Thank you, you too. I know we have the business functions to get to. What is our meeting time here till 6:45?
I think we were scheduled until 6:30. I probably need 2 minutes to go over mine, so you take your time.
Oh, okay. Rob, do you have can you just briefly bring us up to date on what's going on in the facilities area so far this summer?
Certainly. The junior high school chiller project that is completed. Final punch list items have been taken care of. My staff was trained, so that project can be officially closed out. The Jackson Wall Lorraine HVAC project, as I reported, I believe at the last board meeting, it's been a delay on the univents, which will not be arriving till August 28th and August 31st. So we've been working pretty hard, following behind those contractors. We just recently, towards the end of last week, started getting rooms handed over to us to clean, to prepare for the teachers to come back. So my staff's been working very hard with that. The goal there is by the end of this week to have all those classrooms cleaned and ready for teachers to come in and teach virtually if that's the option they choose to do that. So also the larger spaces that aren't serviced by those univents, we're looking to be able to cool those by at the latest August 27th, which I believe is the technical first day of school. So the thing there is that the univents that are delayed obviously provide cooling to the individual classrooms or office spaces where they're located, but the larger areas like the main office area, the cafeteria, the library, those are serviced by fan coils that we do have, and they are hooked up. I know they started energizing Jackson Wall's system today. So hopefully tomorrow we can start providing some cooling to some of the larger areas in there. And Lorraine will hopefully follow suit with that as well this week. The boiler breaching project at the senior high school, that bid was awarded. You guys voted on that last board meeting. So the contractors, I've met with him several times coming in, taking measurements, and we hope to get that kicked off so we can have that project completed before the heating season in October. Other than that, general, maintenance things and small projects have been going on. My staff's been working very hard. Eric Orsag, my custodial supervisor, has been here almost constantly. We did some, his staff's been doing some painting in some stairwells. We did some walkway repairs at Rifton. We did some walkway repairs at the senior high. In general, routine maintenance kind of things that we do normally in the summer.
Right. Good. Thanks, Rob. Any questions for Rob?
I just have a quick one. Rob, do you know where we're at with damages related to the delay in the delivery of the HVAC system?
We haven't incurred any damages yet. We haven't had to spend any additional monies on that. That should not change because there's responsibilities on the contractor's end in order to provide a certain type of space for us. So I don't want to get too deep down the rabbit hole there on a public meeting, but we haven't incurred any real additional costs from that delay yet. Obviously, if this was a normal year with the students returning on the 24th, there would have been substantial. But I guess the contractor would argue that the equipment wouldn't have been delayed if this was a normal year as well. So
that's under like I think they're colloquially known as the act of God provisions, but like technicalities around unforeseen events and stuff like that.
Yeah, to some extent. But we're still looking for some documentation, some backup regarding the delays on these univents.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Rob. And I think that will do it for facilities.
Just real quick for business functions, there's a late addition to the agenda. We discussed this prior as a board. It's an engagement letter with Fox Rothschild related to labor matters that the superintendent is recommending. So that contract is on approval for the agenda this evening, and there's an hourly rate in there that is substantially higher, but I think it's commensurate with the experience that this individual has related to those labor matters. I think it's, I want to say $250 for regular and $300 for special. I'll check quick here.
What I recall.
I think the differential, Mr. Aaron's, was for matters related to, 403Bs and financial advice, which I don't foresee us necessarily partaking of at this point, but it's there if we need it.
Okay. All right. I don't know what that means, but I'm going to pretend like I do.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. Sorry.
John and Hunter, I just have one item I just like to bring the committee up to the speed on. I'm not sure exactly whether this is facilities or business functions, but I wanted to kind of just make a few comments about some conversations that our liaisons have had with the township relative to the community park property. And in those preliminary conversations, the township approached us and indicated that they were interested in kind of moving away from their ongoing responsibilities associated with that facility being used as a community park. And that primarily includes the pavilion, the sandy playground area, and then the bathrooms and the small attached pavilion to that. When we first heard about it, we had some conversations, and considering that it's actually situated in St. Lawrence Borough, but it's being I guess, leased at this point right now by the township for the purpose of a recreational area. We asked them to approach St. Lawrence Borough and find out whether or not St. Lawrence had any interest in taking over the lease and the management of the facility. They had no interest at all, from what we found out at their meeting last Thursday. So we're kind of back to a situation where the township and the school district have very limited options. One of the things we actually talked about, and I'm not sure where the township stands on this, would be the possibility of selling that parcel of land to the township if they'd be interested in owning it. So they might be more invested in further developing, and improving the current facilities there. Right now, they're in pretty bad they're in a pretty bad state. They really don't appear as if they've been maintained all that well over the past couple of years. And there's been some vandalism as well that they're very concerned about, and the nature of the park use. So one of the things that I know they're going to probably discuss, maybe I don't know whether they'll do it in closed session or not, would be the possibility of considering a purchase of the property from the school district. As a board, we really haven't had much conversation about this, whether or not we'd be willing to sell it. But I think those folks from the district who have been involved in this conversation so far don't really see what there's any value in those 17 acres to the school district in terms of its use for educational purposes in any way. It's kind of in a floodplain, and probably represents as much as anything else a liability than it does a value. We certainly don't maintain it to provide recreation for the township. That's not our job as a school district. So just bringing that up, kind of a point of reference in terms of where we are right now with that, and kind of expect the township at some point to get back to us and indicate whether they have any interest in maybe a possible purchase if we're interested. If they don't purchase it, if nothing changes, their plan is to raise those structures and turn that into a grassy area down there, no longer available for recreational use as a park by, other than maybe just as a grassy area, no longer used for the purpose of pavilions and picnics and parties and that sort of thing that the folks in the community have used it for. Any questions on that?
So basically, the ball is in the township's court, Dave.
Yeah, I think right now, John, and I don't really get a strong sense that they would be interested in that. And if they would be interested in it, I don't think they would really give us or be willing to give us fair market price for the property. So clearly they don't feel as if they want to put any more money into a facility that they don't own. And the other part of it obviously is that it's not even in the township. That portion of land actually exists in St. Lawrence Township.
Right.
Or St. Lawrence Borough.
St. Lawrence Borough. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right.
We would also need to go through a process of subdivision if we were to sell that as well, which would take additional time. I don't think it's a huge impediment, but I think it's worth noting.
Okay. Thanks for that update, Dave. Any other business to come before the committee? If not, thank you all for coming, and we will move on to our next meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Hunter.